Hello there, and welcome to AGRC 223. This is the first in the series of video lectures that will be delivered in this course. Now we'll go through some of the content items that are important to plant and animal diseases. This section will be supplemented with some YouTube videos to take you out actually into the fields and show you a little more detail from some experts in the fields of what some of these corn diseases look like. But let's get to our content and set up some of the things for you to know what to look for in those videos. The first one we'll talk about is corn smut. It's a fungal disease, really very, very widely recognized corn disease all through the Corn Belt, throughout any corn growing region. Corn smut can pretty much occur. The main symptom of corn smut is really complete barrenness of the plant, and the affected tissue will just kind of turn necrotic and die away. And so, of course, then we see reduced grain development, not to mention stunted plant growth and poor grain fill. If we get to that part, just because we've destroyed so much photosynthetic tissue, so 30% yield loss is very common whenever you see corn smut set in. It'll be signified by some galls that appear, whether it's on the ear or the stalk, and galls are spore-filled, kind of black and popcorn-looking, so to speak. They start white but turn into really dark lesions. And so as those galls then mature and pop open, they scatter spores so that it can spread and affect more plants nearby. Also, of course, then the wind can pick up those spores and spread it throughout your field and your neighboring fields. So you can find it generally on the ear, either at the midrib of the leaf or some of the nodal buds on the stem. And it's actually, frankly, more likely to affect some of the really well-growing plants. It's not always instances where plants that are already stunted or diseased or challenged or stressed that some of these diseases infect. And this is one of those that will affect a really well-growing, vigorous plant. And it's not poisonous to livestock. There are a few of those that you have to be paying attention to if you're going to feed them to livestock. This one's not particularly poisonous. So that organism, lives freely in the soil. So really seed treatment seed disinfection or treatment is really ineffective, except to spread to the new fields. So, that's a way that some people have thought, well, we'll prevent corn smut by using treated seed. Doesn't really work that way. Resistant hybrids do, and that's a big one. Also, crop rotation. If you can rotate that out of corn on corn for at least 1 year cycle into soybeans or something else, you'll tend to be able to break that cycle of that organism in the soil. And it's aided by if you don't manure that field, because that is perfect substrate for that microbe to grow on in the off season. Head smut, very closely related. Again, galls on the ear and the tassel specifically, and pretty much the entire destruction of these structures. You'll see basically no ear formation whatsoever whenever these galls form on it. Not as common here to the southern Corn Belt, really gets down into the southwestern U.S. and Pacific coast states. So not as common for us to see here, though you will find it, especially in sweet corn. You do find it in sweet corn fairly commonly around here. But same thing, galls, dispersing spores, just like corn smut. Again, a soil-borne disease, so you have to be aware of it then. And rotating corn out of fields out of corn for 2 years really will help break this cycle. But field corns generally are resistant, like I said, to this specific disease, while your sweet corn, you'll find it very, very susceptible and actually quite common here in the Corn Belt. Then a complex of diseases come next, and that is root, stalk, and ear rot. And the gamut of effects that you can see here, whether it's field stand reduction or less vigor to the plant, chlorosis, which is whitening of the plant tissue, which of course then destroys photosynthetic tissue, rotting of the ear, just general blight of the plant, just poor looking plants are associated with root, stalk, and ear rot. And specifically, I think you'll get a YouTube video quiz that's going to go through some of these and a couple excellent examples that will show you, what happens with root rot, stalk rot, and how they're connected, and how it could go all the way up to the ear. But most commonly starting at the bottom of the plant and moving upward, and how it can affect some of the vascular tissue. All of these, again, are fungal type infestations, whether they're gibberellas or fusariums, pythiums, or diplodias. And I point those out in specific because now you're getting into some fungal species that we have to pay attention to from the perspective of, can we feed these types of infected grains to livestock? Pigs and cattle are susceptible to different levels of vomitoxins or aflatoxins differently in different situations, depending on the species of fungus. So you have to be aware of what's in your cornfield from a fungal perspective, because it can affect whether you can feed it or not. Right now, in terms of stalk rot, there's really not much genetic resistance available. So that obviously eliminates some things here that we're going to talk about in terms of treatment. Usually we're talking about these types of diseases, root, stalk, and ear rot, associated with stress, whether it's extremely high nitrogen, so excessive levels of nitrogen in your field. High moisture is especially associated with these types of problems. A lot of other disease pressures coming along. Insect damage, which of course then opens the gate to these types of things to set in. So you really want to select hybrids that are resistant to some of the above stressors and have proper soil fertility, the proper balance of soil nutrition to help minimize stress, to help limit the risk of having these types of diseases develop. Ear rot, again, can continue even after that grain is harvested. That mold damage, when the moisture of the grain is stored greater than 14%, and as you may know, you put that type of problem in a bin and it becomes a great big problem to get out, and you can really destroy a lot of value in the bin by not knowing what's going on there. The rot or darkening of the corn embryo itself is called blue eye, and you can pick up those corn kernels and really see that set in. It's very easy to see, actually. Again, these organisms are carried in decaying corn residue or in the soil. So again, using proper tillage practice, crop rotation will help break the cycle. Some of it is actually also carried on the seed. Not very common anymore, but the mold is really typically evident on the ear, and when you get into the stalk and root rot, the mold is evident, or the rot is evident inside the stalk and into the root. Again, root rot, really starts down around the crown root area. You'll see that in one of the videos. And the weak plants, the root tissue, of course, then is affected. You have less root stretch, root growth, which then affects what's going to go on above the soil line. So you might see crown roots or subcrown roots that appear very dry and brown instead of that healthy white color. So sometimes there's little evidence of whether root rot fungus advances up the stalk, and I think you'll see some video clips, again, supplemental stuff that I've added to this section that will give you a little further detail in that from some experts that are out in the field. But again, pretty serious once you get to dryland conditions, because if we've got root rot and stalk rot that have developed, now we've got a weak stalk, and now as that plant dries out, it's going to be more susceptible to even mild wind and potentially snap, fall over, have lodging, things of that nature, which of course then results in yield loss. Again, prevention, disease tree, use good quality seed. Proper planting soil temperatures. You've seen soil temperatures recommended for planting continue to drop over the years, primarily because the quality of the seed treatment that we've had out there. And we understand now that we can plant in a little bit cooler conditions. So, but again, balanced soil nutrition, use resistant hybrids and things of that nature. Chemical seed treatments are also effective, and I give you some families here of disease that could set in that you could use in order to help increase your yield or save yield help your stand, increase plant vigor and things of that nature. Moving on, and we'll finish up this section with a group of leaf diseases, and we're going to talk about northern corn leaf blight, southern corn leaf blight, Goss's wilt, gray leaf spot, kind of a whole complex of leaf diseases, all slightly different, and you'll see some of them in the videos that I've attached in this section, again, for supplement. But northern corn leaf blight, fairly common around here. Infection of the lower leaves especially, and you'll see kind of boat-shaped or cigar-shaped lesions that are grayish in color, and they'll spread again throughout your field, especially in damp weather. And so we get necrosis of that leaf tissue, and then, of course, obviously we're going to have additional problems to that. But we've seen losses mostly in the east and south is what some of my resources use, but I know it's been common in this area in the Midwest, and more common than we sometimes will recognize soon enough. Southern corn leaf blight, not quite as problematic, but have had some historical events. I cite one here in 1970 where we had major losses throughout the Corn Belt, of southern corn leaf blight. So again, lesions on the ears, they're a little bit different. You'll see some examples of that in the supplemental videos, and this is one that actually can infect the ear. Moving on, gray leaf spot we know has been around for at least a century here, from the Atlantic states to the eastern Corn Belt, stretching out into our neck of the woods, and again also always associated with some kind of stressing period, whether it's cooler temperatures, overcast days, and especially wet conditions. And so you have to be able to know what these lesions look like, because I remember I mentioned that northern corn leaf blight, they're kind of boat-shaped or cigar-shaped. Gray leaf spot lesions are rectangular, restricted by the leaf veins. They're not going to cross over the veins, and also has a halo color. And so you'll see a slightly different color as you're out there scouting for these diseases, which should signify which one that you have. Stewart's wilt, again, found pretty much everywhere through the Corn Belt, carried by often a flea beetle, and again, different type of lesion, extending sometimes the length of the lesion, and very water-soaked, kind of a soggy leaf type condition. Same thing with Goss's wilt, very similar, even starts to discolor the stalk. And affected plants, all of these can be stunted. They can die at any stage. The bacterium that causes these types of things usually can pretty well overwinter in the soil, near the soil surface line, and in seed. So you have to, again, make sure you're buying reputable seed. And this one speaks to the possibility of how does tillage fit in your plan to try and break the cycle of these types of things, or crop rotation. We know for sure that fungal treatments over the top are warranted, and dependent upon the year and the level of infestation that you've got in your field, really dictates how much of a payback you're going to get on that fungicide application over the top. And you have to time these things out pretty carefully. You want to try and hit that application at the early onset whenever you see fungus start to show up in your fields, or that that it's in the area if there's some widespread scouting for it going on. But you have to push the pencil and make sure it'll pay. Sometimes we're talking about $20 to $30 additional cost per acre, and you have to kind of think about, is it worth it to go ahead and put that on? How many bushels does it take in order to pay for that? And of course, at $3 corn, it takes about 10 bushels, and if you're at $4 corn, then of course it's about 6 to 8 bushels in order to pay for that cost. And sometimes the payoff is 3 to 4 times that, actually. So it's interesting. You have to really prepare. The interesting piece of that, and I will close and wrap up here quickly, is the half-life on those fungicides is fairly short. So we don't have a lot of residual control. So if you have diseases like these fungal and bacterial problems developing, and you spray, there's not much residual time for control. So again, you want to be cautious that you time these things out carefully. So hopefully that was some good explanation of some of the basic diseases that you'll find in corn plants here in the Midwestern area, things that you need to be out scouting for if you've got corn or you'd be working with customers, and then a little bit on what to look for and how to treat it and how to prevent it. Hopefully you will enjoy the supplemental videos that I've attached in this module to help show you more specifically what some of these things look like. Thanks for tuning in.